After Joshua passed away in 1375 BC, Israel entered a period of 300 to 400 years known as the era of the Judges. During this time, the Israelites were repeatedly harassed by foreign invaders. On one occasion, King Jabin of Canaan sent his general, Sisera, to invade Israel. Sisera's army was well equipped, boasting 900 iron chariots. The Israelites, terrified, cried out to God for help. In response, God sent the judge Deborah. She said to Israel's warrior Barak, "God will help you defeat Sisera." However, Barak was afraid and told Deborah, "If you do not go with me, I will not go." Deborah looked firmly at Barak, her eyes filled with encouragement, and said, "I will go with you. But because of your fear, the glory of this victory will not belong to you, but to a woman." Deborah and Barak led the Israelite army to Mount Tabor, where they faced Sisera's formidable chariot army. Then God intervened. Dark clouds gathered, the sky turned ominous, and thunder rumbled. Suddenly, torrential rain poured down, turning the ground into a muddy swamp. The iron chariots became stuck in the mire, unable to move. Seeing the enemy trapped, Deborah shouted, "God has delivered the enemy into our hands. Charge forward with courage." Barak and his soldiers, greatly encouraged, charged at the enemy like a flood, as fierce as a tiger descending a mountain. The enemy forces fell into chaos. Seeing that the battle was lost, Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. He arrived at a quiet tent where a woman named Jael lived. Seeing the exhausted and desperate Sisera, Jael pretended to welcome him warmly, saying, "Come in, and I will protect you." Jael gave Sisera milk to drink and laid a blanket over him. Overcome with fatigue, Sisera soon fell into a deep sleep. Holding her breath, Jael quietly took a tent peg and a hammer, tiptoed to Sisera's side, and decisively drove the peg into his temple. With Sisera dead, Israel enjoyed 40 years of peace. However, after 40 years, the Midianites began plundering Israel's food and livestock, causing great suffering among the people. To escape the Midianite raids, a man named Gideon hid while threshing wheat. At that moment, an angel of God appeared to him and said, "Mighty warrior, the Lord is with you." Gideon was astonished. Looking up at the angel, he doubted whether he was truly chosen by God. To confirm, he asked God to show him a sign. Gideon prepared a young goat and unleavened bread and placed them on a rock. The angel of God reached out with his staff, and fire sprang from the rock, consuming the offering. This miracle convinced Gideon that he had indeed been chosen by God. Filled with confidence, Gideon gathered an army of more than 30,000 soldiers to face the enemy. However, God instructed him to reduce the number of troops to demonstrate that victory comes from divine power. Gideon then announced that anyone who was afraid could leave. As a result, 22,000 men departed, leaving only 10,000. But God said, "There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you there." Gideon led his soldiers to the water, following God's instructions. Those who drank by scooping water with their hands were kept, while those who knelt down to drink directly were sent home. In the end, only 300 men remained. As night fell, Gideon divided the 300 men into 3 groups according to God's plan. Each soldier carried a torch, an empty jar, and a trumpet. They moved stealthily in the darkness, spreading out to encircle the Midianite camp. The torches were hidden inside the jars, emitting only a faint glow. The soldiers moved cautiously, careful not to make a sound that could alert the enemy. Meanwhile, the Midianite soldiers slept soundly, unaware of the impending attack. Gideon glanced at his warriors, then raised his torch and gave the order to attack. At the sound of the trumpets, the 300 men shouted in unison. sword for the Lord and for Gideon." They smashed their jars, lifted their torches high, and the sound of trumpets and battle cries shattered the night. Flames blazed in the darkness like divine power descending upon them. The Midianites, believing they were under attack by a massive army, were thrown into utter chaos. In their panic, they fled in all directions, and in the confusion, they turned their weapons on each other, killing their own men. Gideon and his 300 warriors seized the opportunity to attack, securing a resounding victory with minimal casualties. This triumph not only saved Israel, but also taught them an important lesson. With God's power, even a small force can defeat a mighty enemy. During the era of the Judges, there was one warrior of unparalleled strength, Samson. From birth, Samson was dedicated to God by a sacred vow, and in return, God endowed him with extraordinary strength. In one battle, Samson single-handedly defeated 1,000 Philistines using only the jawbone of a donkey. The Philistines discovered that Samson was deeply infatuated with a Philistine woman named Delilah. They approached Delilah, offering her a great sum of money in exchange for discovering the secret of Samson's strength. Motivated by greed, Delilah persistently questioned Samson about the source of his strength. At first, Samson deceived her, saying that if he were bound with new ropes, he would lose his strength. However, each time the Philistines acted on Delilah's information, Samson easily broke free. But Delilah refused to give up. She nagged him relentlessly, even accusing him of not truly loving her. Eventually, in a moment of intimacy, Samson revealed his secret. His hair had never been cut, for it was a symbol of his vow to God and the source of his strength. Once Delilah learned the truth, she waited until Samson fell asleep and cut off his hair. The moment his hair was cut, his vow to God was broken, and his strength vanished. Delilah then summoned the Philistines, who captured Samson, gouged out his eyes, and took him as a prisoner. Samson became a slave to the Philistines, enduring daily humiliation as he was forced to grind grain in prison. In his suffering, he reflected on his life and realized that his downfall came from betraying his vow to God. Filled with remorse, he prayed for one final chance at strength. One day, the Philistines gathered in their temple to celebrate, mocking Samson's defeat. They brought him out to entertain them. Samson prayed to God, saying, "Lord, remember me. Strengthen me once more so that I may take revenge for my eyes." God heard Samson's prayer, and strength returned to him. Samson grasped the two central pillars of the temple, crying out as he pushed with all his might. The massive structure collapsed, crushing everyone inside, including the Philistine leaders. Samson perished along with his enemies. Though Samson's life was marked by struggles, in his final moment, he demonstrated his faith in God and sought redemption.